Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. If you cannot, please feel free to send out a question and let me know. Welcome. I am Jessica Wilson. I am the Raise Center Communications Director, and this is our first 2020 webinar, an introduction to the new Vocational Rehabilitation Toolkit for Parent Centers. I will quickly go through some how-tos in case anybody who is joining us does not have any familiarity with the GoToWebinar program. So on your screen, I hope you can see the screen. If you cannot, please let me know. On the screen, you should see a screenshot of the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can listen through your computer speaker by default. If you prefer to join over the phone, you can select telephone in the audio pane, and the dial information will be displayed. You just have to put in your unique PIN. Also, you can automatically collapse the control panel or keep it open using the view menu and uncheck auto hide. Today's presentation is being recorded and we will make it available to you on the Raise website within a week of this live presentation, and we will send out the link when it becomes available. And oops. To the right of the GoToWebinar PowerPoint viewer is a GoToWebinar control panel where you can select how you hear the webinar, raise your hand, ask questions, and I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my slide, but you can ask questions to the staff in the control panel. We will take time between our various presenters to answer questions, so type anything that you need in there. You will also notice that in the chat section, we have provided the links to both the PDF version and the online version of this VR toolkit we're reviewing today. And it will also be available in the slides that we send out with the recording once we make that available to everybody. So at this point, I would like to turn over the presentation. We have our Raise team. Not everybody is here today, but we have Josie Badger and Peg Kinsell, who are co-directors, and I'm not sure if Maria Rodriguez is available. I am Jessica Wilson. Miriam and Deborah are not available today, but we always list them because they're important parts of our team. And now I will hand it over to Josie Badger.
Great, thank you so much, Jess. Thank you all for joining us today. As Jessica said, this is 2020, and we are super excited to be able to present a brand new toolkit for you and for the work that you are doing with young adults with disabilities. We have been given the privilege of working with Rick Considine on developing this tool, which was an adaptation from a VR toolkit that was created by the National Disability Rights Network. And this has been specifically custom tailored to support the work of parent centers and professionals working with families and youth. We've had tremendous support from the organizations who we work with under our RSA PTI grant. And so we are so grateful for the ongoing support from the Federation with Nancy Mader, and for support from various other entities, including NDRN. And so thank you to everyone who has contributed. Over the next few probably half hour, you will be learning about what is in this tool, how to navigate it, and how it can really be applied to the work that you are doing currently. So I'd love to turn it over to Rick.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along with us today. I also want to thank everybody who participated in the development of the guide and everyone who provided feedback. We feel privileged to have worked on it, and I feel great digging back into my protection and advocacy roots. Have I been handed the screen yet?
We can see your screen.
Okay, great. My mouse is moving along. I just wanted to take a minute to sort of walk through the layout of the document. What we're looking at now is the roughly, I think it's 36 or so pages of the various sections of the document. On the title page, which is right here, there's a sort of how to look at this guide, how to use this guide. We've divided it into a number of sections, including a glossary in the first position. And then we have a number of content parts. I'll read through them so we have a sense of sort of where we're going and sort of what the topic areas are. First part is Introduction to Vocational Rehabilitation and Eligibility. Second part is Special Education Transition and VR Services. Third is Employment Goals and the Individual Plan for Employment. Fourth is Vocational Rehabilitation Services in general. And fifth is Vocational Rehabilitation and its interface with Assistive Technology. And the sixth is Appeal Rights under VR law. All of these in the PDF are links. You can see that it will go somewhere if you click on them in the PDF. Let's move into the first section, and we'll just scroll through a few things that I want to point out about how to sort of navigate the document and use it. Each part of the document is segregated by its name in a table of contents at the beginning of the part. This is the glossary, and this is color-coded blue. You'll also see that the pages in each one of these sections is color-coded similarly. In the case of the glossary, it's that dark blue. In the case of the introduction and eligibility, it's this red color. We also have those in the footers and other places around the document so you can see sort of what's going on. In the glossary, we cover a whole number of the terms that are used throughout the document. We provide brief descriptions of what those mean, because in the document we might not cover the exact sort of definition under the law of those things. So you can refer back to the glossary at any time just by clicking on those navigation items in the table of contents. Let's go to the introduction and eligibility. In this section, we cover a few things. We talk a little bit about how VR agencies work, eligibility in general for rehabilitation services. We go through some of the rules that govern that eligibility and the responsibilities of participants in those services, financial participation, comparable service rules that may restrict their eligibility. We cover order of selection, which is a complicated thing in many places, but we try to get through as much as possible, which is general and applicable pretty much everywhere. We also cover a little bit about evaluations and assessments. In each one of these sections, just sort of to show you how the formatting is working, we talk about the issues in a little bit more detail, and then we cover we use these short little advocacy tips to sort of help you understand how those things might be applied, or in some cases, what some of the rubs may be in getting those things done and where the complications might lie. So if we go down to Special Education Transition and Vocational Rehabilitation, which is section 2, part 2, we talk a little bit about how people can get involved, how they can engage their school districts, and engage VR as a collaborator in providing VR services while students are in transition. So the one thing that I would point out in a couple of places, I'm going to point out where things may get a little bit complicated, and our document may not go into absolute detail. I'm sorry, that was my cat. So in some cases, students are eligible for multiple VR services while they're in school. In the case of pre-ETS services, it can get a little more complicated. And the rules and the availability of those services may vary from place to place. In cases where your situation locally at the state level is governed by different orders of selection and other rules that may apply for your particular VR agency. We try to cover as much as we can in the guide. And we also suggest that you may need a little more assistance in parsing out what those rules mean in terms of the provision of advocacy. In this case, where pre-ETS crosses over, pre-ETS, VR, and transition crossover, depending on eligibility, we suggest that you might want to reach out to your local CAP agency. That's the Client Assistance Program, operated within the protection and advocacy system for your state. And for every section in the guide, we provide links and places where you can go to find that information. I should also note that in these sort of notes at the end of each section, we provide links to Ron Hager and NDRN's terrific document that we used and consulted with a lot along the way, work assistive technology and state vocational rehabilitation agencies, for a little more detail. And the client assistance program in each one of your states can certainly provide much more local context for how some of the advocacy might be done or what might be needed along the way. Let's move down to understanding employment and VR goals. This section outlines the development of the IPE, the Individual Plan for Employment, and sort of what needs to be done, who's responsible, how does it get initiated, what happens when, and what are elements of those IPEs that might be most useful in developing a program for a particular student. We talk a little bit about some of the things that are some of the issues and systems that operate around IPEs. Maximization of employment is a legal definition. We provide a little bit of that definition. There's certainly more in the source material. We talk a little bit about informed choice. And again, we have resources at the end of the section. Part 4 is Vocational Rehabilitation Employment Services. We go through quite a few of the required services and potential services that VR might use here to let you and your clients figure out sort of what's available. This is not an exhaustive list, but they provide sort of ideas of what sort of might be possible in developing an IPE. We talk a little bit about assistive technology here. AT is a big part of VR services. It's also a big part of transition. Where those things cross over, it gets a little bit complicated. Who's going to pay for what? Whether devices can be transferred from one situation, say at the transition program for the school, to work or to higher education or other forms of vocational work after school, gets a little bit complicated. But we provide as much information as we can in short here to sort of get you along the way with that. That's another situation where you may want to talk to the AT program at your local P&A program if it's operated there, or in some cases it's operated independently of the P&A. We talked in the section on assistive technology and transition about VR and AT in secondary schools. We talk more about AT in post-secondary situations. We talk about a little more about higher education and post-secondary in this section in terms of accommodations and what things might be available to students in those settings, and try to parse out as much as we were able to who's responsible for paying for what and under what circumstances. You can see that there are a few more advocacy tips in this section than others because it does get a little bit complicated depending on the individual student's particular circumstances. Again, your local CAP and the P&A AT program can certainly help if things get a little dicey or the details get a little bit overwhelming in that area, which they can. Individual circumstances can change and make a difference there. So in section 6, which is the last section, we talk about appeal rights under vocational rehabilitation. They are They are sophisticated and they are generally pretty reliable when they are implemented. There are several stages of review in VR services, and we try to detail those as much as possible here. Many of these can be done with advocates. It's not until you get to the higher levels that a lawyer might be involved, and your local CAP and AT programs might be able to assist with some of those as well. That's roughly all I have. I know that the PDF will be available online. There's also an HTML version of the document that's available online, and Josie and Miriam talked a little bit about that. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer some of that. But we're thrilled getting this to go live, and look forward to keeping up to date. I will say, as the author, that if there are any local issues that you think our knowing would help advance the development of the product, then we should certainly hear about those, and you can let either Josie or Megan know about those particular issues. We'd be glad to consider changes and updates to the document. Okay.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, Lauren Agaratis is asking if you have anything on, if there's anything in the toolkit on person-centered planning, centers for independent living, or supported decision-making.
Nothing specific, because our document was targeted specifically at the application of the interface between secondary transition and VR interfaces. I do know and understand that those organizations and those services that that Lauren mentions are often providers and are important resources for folks who are either seeking these services or helping people advocate for them. I think we could probably develop some content that mentions those as resources in the process. I understand certainly that they're a big part of it, but we try to stay close to the regulations and sort of legal issues around vocational rehabilitation agencies. The rest of that network is certainly important and certainly provides extra services, and both advocates and families should know about them. Perhaps we should consider adding some more to those.
Thank you. There's one more question which probably will relate to that answer, but is there a section on self-advocacy?
We do discuss quite a bit about self-advocacy once we start beginning to talk about post-secondary options and the differences between getting yourself accommodations and services in post-secondary settings once the secondary transition services and graduation have happened. Self-advocacy is an important element of transition services from the very beginning of transition services and on. I think in the section on special education and transition, we talked a little bit about the importance of it and the importance of developing those skills in students as early as possible, so that they can make appropriate transitions once the secondary school situation is over.
Okay. Thank you. There are no more questions, so we're going to switch over to my screen, and we have, all right, so I just want to share the link. There are some questions people asking about the link to this PDF document that Rick was just showing. I did share it in the chat box, but people are having trouble finding it, and I'm not able to see what the audience sees because I have administrative control. But the link is here, and I also want to show you online. If you go to raisecenter.org, and in our menu at the top in resources, if you go to the third option for partners, parent centers, youth, and families, you can see right in this new from Raise, the toolkit is right there, and you can link to it from there if you want to access it. And as we get updates, we will be updating this document, but it will have the same name. So anytime you link to it, it will always go to the same URL. And that's how you want to get to it if you can't see the link on the chat box, is go to the Raise Center, Resources, Partners, Parent Centers, Youth and Family, and you'll find it right there. It is also in HTML version on the SIPR Hub, on Parent Center Hub, and you can see the URL here if you can't see it in your chat. And you should just be able to search by VR services, and it will come up in our search bar. It's an HTML version of everything that Rick went through. It has the glossary with the terminology, and we have nice little tooltips that will show up throughout this document for any of the glossary terms, and you can navigate through the different parts that he showed you in the PDF document. You can see again that anything that's in the glossary will show up as a tooltip, and all of the information that he provided in the PDF version are all available here, and you can move around from section to section as needed or go back to the main toolkit. This can be shared, it can be downloaded as well. So that's really all that I have, because Rick explained everything about the actual topics and sections. So I will turn it over to, actually, I have a question. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I changed it over or not. So I am going to turn it over to Josie, who can fill in any blanks. I don't see any more questions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you both so much for going through all of that information. And as I think Rick mentioned, this tool is really an adaptation of a piece of material that was developed by the National Disability Rights Network on vocational rehabilitation. And we have seen repeatedly as different vocational rehabs are starting to work with younger audiences, they're working in high school, and as individuals with IEPs and 504 plans are pursuing higher education, they're pursuing employment, that this need for clarification of what VR is responsible for, what they could pay for, what are decisions that might be made within the office that might vary from office to office, keep coming up. And the vocational rehabilitation system is so important to so many of us and has helped so many of us, but is really a very different system depending on who you talk to, what office you work with, what your counselor does, or who they are. And so this is meant really for a center to be able to get the basics. Because different states administer the program differently, it really can vary state by state. But the information in this tool has been really maintained to be at a national level. I'm looking at federal laws and responsibilities from RSA. And so we see this as a starting point. We hope to, over the next year, probably a little less, work on some more hands-on materials that would be directed towards the family and youth, that would be pieces that you could literally apply directly to them as handouts or training materials. That will be our step 2 in this process. But this information is so important just for you to have at your fingertips at any moment, that we wanted to get this out to you right now. So, Peg, did you have any final thoughts?
I think you covered everything pretty well. Again, you know, we want to thank NDRN, and we recommend that you all hit the link and go see how robust the document that Ron Hager wrote was, and the guidance there. So our, you know, our main purpose again was to try to translate that into family or youth friendly application to help you guys develop tools that are appropriate for your parent centers. It was a lot of work. We thank the Considines very much for their work. We thank the partners from our RSA centers. And we do look forward to, as Josie said, putting together some info briefs and, you know, further dissecting this to help you with training tools. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again for always being there to support the mission of the RSA centers.
Jessica, do we have any additional questions?
There is one question. Is this available or will be available in another language? And then, is it available in paper format other than us printing it out?
Okay, so question number 1. At this moment, it has not been translated, but that is something that we can and should do. And so what we'll look at is what languages would be the most helpful, and then when those would be developed, we would make sure to disseminate through both the website, the parent centers, and through the listserv. Paper copies have not been printed to this point. It's such a massive document that I would highly recommend trying to keep it on the computer. The nice part about using it on the computer is you can do the Control F and find a keyword. You can take a screenshot and send it. And I know that there are people that really prefer paper, and I think that that's really great, but I also think that the amount of paper this will probably take might kill our planet. So I appreciate those questions. Was there anything else, Jess?
No, I just replied. There will be a recording sent out.
Yes.
We'll make that available soon. And Hunink is saying Spanish would be great, and that's usually our first translation language, so we will keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that this could definitely be translated. We know that this tool will primarily be used by parent centers staff because it still is technical. We tried to make sure that the language used was something that all parent center staff would understand and be able to relay to families and youth. However, there are some very complicated VR ideas that that would need to be fleshed out. And so I foresee an important next step for us would be to develop those fact sheets, the handouts, and make sure that those are accessible in other languages for the families and youth that you could directly give them to.
If I could, one
That's
option
right.
for translations, because there's an HTML version available, while Google Translate is not the most ideal translator you can use, the web pages can be translated using Google Translate.
Thank you, Rick. Yes, I forget about that, and that's such a helpful piece. And yes, it's not always exact, especially when we get into vocational rehab legal terminology. But yes, it could translate quite a bit of this. Any other questions?
No, somebody's just asking about that chat box, and someone else said if you scroll up in the green box, you'll be able to see the chat box with the links. If you cannot, I will get this all to you very, very quickly, I promise. Let me see if I can once more, before we end this, paste. This is the HTML version that I'm sending in the question box, and this is the link to the full document, and I am also going to send that in the chat box, and hopefully everybody gets it. Again, I'll get this out to you as quickly as possible. I just have to convert the recording, so I should be able to, in fact, I'll prioritize it and get it to everybody who attended today.
And actually, you all are the first to see this. And so there's going to be a large release email that will be going out, I think, today. And so you all will also be getting the email. So this is sort of your sneak peek. You're getting the first reveal of this. So you're in the club, but this will be going out further today.
Okay. So with that, thank you everybody for attending, for participating, for presenting. And when we do close this webinar, you will automatically receive a survey if you would kindly take it. If you still want the links faster than I can send them in an hour or two, you can write to me, Jessica Wilson, jwilson@spanadvocacy.org, and I will forward them to you personally as soon as you ask. So I think that's it, Josie. Nice short webinar.
So sorry. Yes. Thank you all. Thank you for your help. Thank you again to the Considines and to the SPAN and to the Federation of NDRN for reviewing this tool. We hope that it is helpful in all of your technical assistance to families. We feel that vocational rehab is a foundational point for youth to be able to be successful in their adult lives. And so please use this. If you have any follow-up questions, thoughts, when you go to the link that Jessica will be sending out for this, there's a contact raise button up at the top. Please feel free to send any positive or constructive criticism to us so that we can make changes or new materials as you all see fit. So thank you all. Our next webinar will be coming up in March, and you will be getting flyers shortly on that. So thank you all for joining us. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care, everybody.